It's the sponsorship professional governance landscape, and it essentially came from my need to understand, do we have everything we need for the professional sponsors to be able to navigate their duties in the governance against their competency framework. So our governance is actually quite varied and complex, as it needs to be if you're trying to maintain, operate and enhance a over 100-year-old network. And the suite of documents that comprises our governance, normally expressed as standards, is massive. It's huge. It needs to be. But it does make it somewhat difficult to navigate, especially if you are seeking a specific duties and needs of any one profession. So that's on one side. On the other side, as a professional sponsor in Network Rail, you are able to have all of your competencies recorded in the system, not just able to, but need to. And I was wondering, as a head of profession, am I certain and how do I know if the competency framework aligns and supports the elements of the governance that we are asking sponsors to do? Or if not, where are the gaps? Or if we have elements of governance that are supported by nothing in the competency framework, what does that mean? At which point in the project lifecycle or program lifecycle is that likely to cause most of the problem? So the landscape is a single, I would say, simplified view of all of that information that you can then approach from any aspect that we just touched on. I started from the governance because the standards are already in place, and in many instances they are our Network Rail's response to how do we discharge the duties that are enshrined in law in certain aspects. So I started from clauses that specifically say the sponsor will be accountable, responsible about doing anything. So every single one of those clauses, it was my starting point. They generally then wrap up more logically into the individual standards, and standards carry a theme. So it was then easier for me to understand per theme. So let's say risk management, and link that again per clause level to specific competencies. So starting point being the governance itself, and then seeing whether and if and where and how are those asks and tasks supported by individual competencies that the sponsors already have in their competency profile.
Okay, very interesting. And in terms of complexity or maturity, is there a level of competency that's defined for particular projects or programs? So do you have a sort of sense that if you're a sponsor working on this kind of project, you need to be able to do this, whereas if you're working on this, you really need to be able to do this plus this? How do you kind of how do you avoid the problem of the sponsor just being the same, all things to all people?
That's a broad question. Our governance, parts of the governance do carry a risk assessment, and that leads to ascertaining the level of complexity that and the project carries. And depending on the level of risk and the level of complexity, it follows slightly different governance paths. So effectively, by aligning the work that I needed to do for the landscape, for visibility of all of that to the governance, I effectively avoided that pitfall. Right. For if you have a simpler, arguably simpler project, yes, then the governance will be appropriate to that level of risk and that type of project, and therefore the tasks and asks of any one professional will be, again, appropriate to that type of project, and the competency framework then fits that. So the landing page you're looking at now just describes the key aspects of or key prisms that you can use to look at effectively this exactly the same information. So RACI, whether it's a level of responsibility, accountability, where you see the word PACE that describes the life cycle, the project and program life cycle that we are using in Network Rail. So that is just sort of a landing page that describes everything. However, the one that shows the entire landscape is this, and as it paints itself, you will see what I mean about the level of complexity it carries. Effectively, what you are seeing is that exact information. Let's just remove the standards that we are currently challenging or discussing with the standards owners to understand whether sponsor indeed is the best placed person to be
Okay.
undertaking the duties under. And depending on whereabouts in the life cycle of a project you are, so are you at the strategic development stage, or are you somewhere in the delivery, or are you in the closing stages of your project and program, you should be able to see quite quickly which particular governance elements are applicable in those cases.
Mhm.
And also, there it is, and
Yeah.
also which particular of the competencies which are described in these purple boxes at the bottom
Yeah.
are applicable.
Okay.
So whether you are looking at which area of the life cycle we're talking about, or whether you have a look at individual standards, or whether you have a look at individual competencies, you can actually get a view. And why this is useful is if you are getting, as a project professional, if you are getting ready for the next stage of a project, you can very easily see which particular pieces of governance are you going to be subject to, and which particular competencies need to be pin sharp for you to be able to do your job. Similarly, if you are preparing a personal development plan and you know which particular competencies you need to be developing, you can understand where the impact of that development is going to be felt most. The descriptions and information that then exist within each of these boxes on the
Mhm.
landscape will then take you to the resources and guiding minds where you can find out a lot more. For me personally, this was important because information changes, and the guiding minds are very, very active on a number of these topics. So to point our sponsors to the relevant information, current information, in the best place in the organization and externally that we can, that was important. Hence, this living, breathing way to look at the information from different aspects.
Right. And when you say guiding minds, what is a guiding mind?
Because of the types of projects and programs that we run, not all of the competencies you can probably see are, how to put it, traditional P3M competencies of projects, programs, and portfolios. For example, we have construction design and management, and other technical skills that need to be completed. And for those, I'm not an expert. However, thankfully, we do have quite a fantastic team and what I would say core a guiding mind on each one of these good topics. So those are the people that I would go to for determining the levels of the competency needed in which instance, and good resources, new research, guidance, how-to files, lessons learned, because that's where they will be holding the information. So rather than me trying to replicate all of that, this landscape is pointing users in the right direction and to seek the most current and most up-to-date information they can get.
Okay. So it would point the user to some training. It might point them to some a resource, which could be something in the lessons learned database. Would it also point them at a person? Would it also say, actually go and talk to Barno, for example, because she knows what she's talking about, or would it, or is that not included?
I do try to avoid that, because with such a large organization, people, individual person may or may not be in one position for a very long time.
Mm,
I would much rather point them to the right group or team or
okay.
area of the business that is looking
Yes.
after a topic.
Yes.
So if you are looking, as you were saying, for the competencies, it will point you to learning pathways where you can have a look at what are we currently suggesting to do in terms of upskilling, whether that be shadowing somebody, a book or a TED talk or websites such as yours, that information will be contained within the competency area. When it comes to the life cycle elements at the top, or any of the governance elements, it will point you to that specific standard and any team that is looking after the information that is within the standard. So rather than individuals, but as close a community as we can point people to, yes. Well, the first feeling was that of a relief, because I didn't find any elements of our governance that we're not covering already. So that was really, really good news. Now, in terms of quality and the quantity of information that we have for each competency versus the clauses, clearly, continuous improvement, there will be always something to do. But one thing that did jump out at me, and it will be resolved relatively soon, because we are planning to regularly review the competency framework as much as we do the governance as well, is environmental sustainability. So that will very likely feature as the next purple box on the landscape as soon as we do that element. We need to bring that to the fore.
Yes.
Although it's already intertwined within our governance, and there are specific clauses and processes and things we need to do in terms of environmental impact assessments and etc. I think I would like it as looking after the profession, I would like it to be far more front and center of the competency framework, and far more easier to spot where and how that competency is supporting what we need to do.
Okay.
So that's where it's already taken me to, and I've no doubt that this level of visibility, and as governance changes and new things are introduced, it is much easier for me to make sure that we indeed are providing everything the sponsors need to be able to do their work. And we all know that the work that we do is complex, and the projects that we do are not easy to navigate, but it still does kind of take you aback when it's pictorial and you can physically see the level of the complexity and the number of things that need to be completed, and completed well. So visibility is always a good thing, and now we have it in a way that, at least for me, it's easier to understand what is necessary when, and how is it supported. It's been now in place for several months, I'd say about 6 months or so. And it effectively replaces what we used to have, and it was called the sponsorship handbook, which did contain this type of information, but it was far more static, and it ended up, because of the amount of information they need to carry, as quite a significant volume of a document. So now we have replaced it with this interactive tool, and it has been universally well received. As I keep saying to my stakeholders, I don't have a sat nav, but at least now we have a map, which is potentially more than we've had before. Our governance system already has a bit of a heartbeat, very specific processes by which people will create remits for changes to existing standards, creation of a new standards. So I see the front door to any of the governance changes. And my team and I are in active contact with anybody who creates a remit or whose remit is approved. And we have a quick conversation, if that's the best thing, to understand whether it does or doesn't have impact on sponsors. If it does, then we're going to get engaged with that piece of work, at the end of which, if there are any changes to the standards, new clauses, new standards, whatever the case may be, that will find its way into the landscape. And that includes the information such as, where can we find good resources, how can people learn more if they need to know more, etc. And the governance, that's for the governance. For the sponsorship competency framework, I'm the owner of that framework, so I control the heartbeat of regular renewals and of that information. So yeah, that's all within my small team. At the moment in Network Rail, we have over 300, but less than 400 permanent professional sponsors whose sole reason for being is to be that conduit between our clients and our network and the deliverer, and make sure that the investment and our stakeholders and the scope of that solution to whatever issue the clients have are created and deliver the benefits the client expected to be done. So there is quite a lot on their shoulders, and a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. So this is one of the reasons why I thought it would be prudent to have them, help them understand what do they need to do now, tomorrow on their projects and programs, or indeed in their career. Where are they now with their competencies? What do they need to build on for the work they have to do today, and for any future positions that they might want to undertake?